Good morning. The topic for this lesson is to talk about the digestive system and nutrition. We have to think about the digestive system, not only digestions, but this actually include four functions. The ingest of the food, like my favorite food is, for example, is always been cheesecake, for example. So how I ingest it, how this cheesecake is going to be breaking down into small molecule, and how this cheesecake is going to be absorbed as a nutriment and eliminated in the end. So the process of digestions became always with the mouth that have a teeth, right? So it began with the mouth, with the intake of the food. The teeth here play an important role in masticating, showing, physically breaking down the food into smaller particles. But not only that, while we are masticating and showing our food physically breaking it down, the enzymes that are present in our saliva also begin to chemically break down the food. Think about it like when you have a piece of bread in your mouth and you start feeling like it's a sugary because the carbohydrate that is a starch that is in this piece of bread is going to be broken down by enzyme called amylase that is existing in the saliva. Remember that all the prefix for enzymes finish by an ASE, ASE, amylase, peptidase, lipase, nucleotidase, okay? Sucrase. Those are enzymes. So in the saliva, we have an enzyme called amylase that will break down those big starch. Starch is a polysaccharide. I remind you what is polysaccharide. It means a lot of sugars on it, a lot of simple sugar, a lot of monosaccharide, which is just a glucose that bound with another glucose, bound with another glucose, making a chain, big chain of a polymer called the polysaccharide. Poly mean more, the numbers of saccharides, of monosaccharides getting together to make this starch, which is a carbohydrate. It's not any carbohydrate, it's a polysaccharide carbohydrate. So think about the digestions. As I said, there are four functions. The intake of the food that happen in the oral cavity and the teeth here play a role as well as the enzymes that they are in the saliva, breaking down this food into particles, small particles. The food then he go into the stomach, but how he reached the stomach? He reached the stomach through this, let me show it to you. I'm trying to get my hand here. Through this long tube that connects the mouth to the stomach. He connects the mouth to the stomach. This is called esophagus. And how the food move from the mouth to the stomach? Not only by gravity. You're going to tell me, okay, it's by gravity. Not only that, in the esophagus, we have smooth like muscles that they are going to contract, and when they contract, they are going to push the food using a mechanism that we call peristalsis. Peristalsis mechanism. It's a peristalsis, peristalsis, which is a smooth muscle of the esophagus that will contract, pushing the food from the toward the stomach. Once it's in the stomach, more breakdown happen, more, because the stomach has, we are going to see it later on, they have more cells and more enzymes, and the pH in the stomach, oh wow, extremely acidic. It's between 1.5 to 2.5 as a pH, very, very acidity and acidic. And this acidity not only is going to kill any microorganism that existed on the food, some bacteria that they are in the food, but also breaking down more the food, and therefore it's going to activate more digestive enzymes. Further breakdown, that's digestions, which is the breakdown the food, that's digestions. More digestions continue, it's happened in the stomach, more it's going to continue in the small intestine. And this time, once the food leave the stomach, we call it a chyme, chyme. And then in the intestine, further breakdown of the food take place. And using also some accessory organs such as the liver, gallbladder, and the pancreas. And smaller molecules are then going to be absorbed into the bloodstream through the epithelial cells lining the wall of the small intestine. After that, I mean, most of the nutriment that you need has been absorbed here. We become the process of eliminations. The waste materials travel to the large intestine, where the water here is again reabsorbed, and the drier waste materials is compacted into feces and stored until he's completely eliminated through the anus. So let's just have an idea about the complete and incomplete digestive system. Complete and incomplete, I mean, in the hydra and planaria, we have a sac a body plan. The mouth serve as entrance and exit, is the same one. Us, we have a mouth and we have anus. A mouth is to receive the food, anus is to eliminate the wastes, the wastes. Most other animals, we have, like us, they have a complete digestive system with a mouth and anus. And you can see that here the digestive or the alimentary tract, which is the inner tube, is completely separated from the body wall by the xylem. The basic plan for the vertebrate is the same as the earthworm. The digestive enzymes are produced by gland in the wall of the tract, of the digestive tract, or by accessory gland that lie nearby. They are also going, those accessory glands are liver, pancreas, and gallbladder. They are also going to release those enzymes into the digestive tract. Remember this, we are never going to find the food on those accessory glands. You are not going to see food. You will see them in the intestine and the stomach when you open it, right? But you are never going to see it in the liver or in the pancreas, except in the digestive, the tract itself. This is just a picture showing you the complete digestive system, starting by the oral cavity, the esophagus, the stomach, the large and small intestine, and also the accessories organs, liver, pancreas, and gallbladders. I will come back to these pictures because I want to talk about the opening, the connections between each organ, esophagus to the stomach, stomach to the intestine, liver to the small intestines, all right, pancreas, etc. So the mouth, the teeth reflect actually the diet of the animal. The birds lack teeth. They use gizzard to break up the food. The carnivore eat meat, and the omnivore, they are both. They are eat plants and animals. And herbivore eat only plants. The teeth are for extensive chewing. So the omnivore have both teeth on them, and the carnivores, the teeth are for biting and tearing. So the food contain the four major macromolecules, which are carbohydrates, proteins, nucleic acids, and lipids. Those macromolecules to be absorbed need first to be broken down into smaller molecule. So in the mouth, it's chemical and physical breaking down of those food. We call it physical and chemical digestions. Chemical because the saliva have enzyme that will break down carbohydrates into, for example, into maltose. Maltose is disaccharide. It's a glucose plus a glucose. Why? Because starch is just a polymer of glucose. So when he break it down, he break it to a maltose, which is two sugar together, two glucose together, disaccharide. Now the food, when he's showing and mixed with those enzymes, we don't call it a food. We are going to call it a bolus. B-O-L-U-S. It's called the bolus. And this bolus is the one that he's going to go move via the esophagus, this long tube, using the peristalsis muscles like contractions, pushing this bolus into the stomach. And we can taste this food because in our tongue we do have receptors, we call that taste buds, that allow us to taste the food that exists in our tongue and other surface in the mouth. When we are digesting, it's very very pay attention to this. Sometimes people, when we were kids, they told us, okay, don't talk when you are eating. It's have a reason why. Not only because your mouth is full of food and you are going to spread it everywhere, but also it have actually a medical or technical reason for that. Because the human digestive and respiratory passage, they came together through the pharynx. They came together. So when the food is swallowed, the soft palate move up to close the nasal cavity. We have an opening to the larynx, which is the epiglottis. The bolus will move this food that now is moving from the sorry, from your mouth and going through the esophagus. You don't want it to go inside of your passageway, your lung. You don't want that. So the epiglottis is going to close this opening and is going to move through the pharynx into the esophagus, but not to the larynx and therefore to the your air passageway. And then after that, this muscles contraction that we call the peristalsis is going to start, moving this bolus toward the stomach. And here in the next slide, this is exactly what I mean. You have the air passageway. They are going through the larynx to your trachea and then go to your passage airway, the lungs, all right, to breathe. And in the same way, this is exactly what they are using. Also the same passageway. The air and the food are using the same passageway. But to avoid the food, now it's called, once he leaves the mouth, we call it a bolus. To go inside to the larynx and therefore to the lung, we have to have it only in the esophagus, all right? Because if you see the larynx and the esophagus, they are completely in parallel, their positions. So we have this epiglottis that is going to actually close this and have only the food going through the esophagus. So the bolus now is in the esophagus. Once it's in the esophagus, you see the food is the green stuff that I am seeing, is the green stuff. That's the food. The black arrow is the air. The epiglottis is fold to block, actually, you see how we fold to block the passage into the larynx. And once in the esophagus, we have this muscles like contractions called peristalsis, is the movement that will completely move also by gravity, but contractions of those muscles in toward the stomach. The epiglottis is a flap of a tissue that covers the trachea, opening during swallowing to prevent the food from entering the lung. So I summarized before I move to the next organ that do digestion, which is the stomach. The oral cavity do both physical and chemical digestions. right? The digestions begin in the oral cavity, which is the point of entry of the food into the digestive system. The food is broken into smaller particles by mastications, the chewing action of the teeth. All mammals have teeth and can chew their food to begin the process of physically breaking it down into smaller particles. The chemical process, in addition of this physical process, begins also by showing as the food mixed with the saliva, the salva. And this salva is produced by your salivary glands. Salva contain mucus that not only moisten the foods and buffer the pH of the food, but also contain enzymes that has not only antibacterial actions, they contain what we call lysozyme, but it also contains very important enzyme. It's salivary enzyme. We call it amylase. Remember, we have another amylase that happen also in the stomach. We call this amylase salivary amylase that begins. Remember the word I insist on. It begins the process of converting starch into disaccharide called maltose. Why exactly maltose? Why is not sucrose or lactose? Well, we are dealing with starch. Starch is a polysaccharide of glucose, and maltose is glucose plus a glucose. Starch, it's more than a lot of glucose getting together. Is glucose with another glucose with another glucose with another glucose with another glucose. Maltose, it's just two glycos together. So he's going to making it smaller. He's going to give us a maltose, which is just a glycose bending to another glycose by a glycosidic linkage. Another enzyme called lipase is also going to be present there, but this lipase came from lipids, so therefore this is an enzyme that will break down lipids. Fat is produced by the cell in the tank to break down the fat. It's the tank enzyme. So the chewing and the wetting actions provided by the teeth and saliva and the tongue help in the swallowing. They are going to make this food. Now we don't call it a food, we call it a bolus. B-O-L-U-S. So the tongue is going to help with the swallowing, and he's going to move the bolus from the mouth into the pharynx. The pharynx has two passageways. One passageway that has, he's in relation with two other organs. He's in relation with the esophagus and the trachea. He let the air go in as well as he let the food get in. But when the food is there, he's going to close the one passageway, the passageway that lead to the trachea is going to close it, so the food will not go into the lungs. We have a tissue called epiglottis, which is a flap tissue that covers the trachea opening during the swallowing to prevent the food from entering the lung. The lungs, we have more than one lungs. All right, guys, so let's move now to the next organ, which is the stomach. Wow. The stomach here remember, we're still in digestions. We didn't begin the absorption yet. We're still in the digestions. The stomach is a sac-like organ, and I love to see it as, is this like a sac organ, right? He stretch is a muscle, so he can stretches to store food and secrete gastric digestive juices. And the wall, since is a muscle, he can contract to mix the bolus with the digestive juice. Remember, this mix of food that is called bolus, once it's mixed with the digestive juices that exist in the stomach, we are no longer going to call it a bolus. I will tell you what we call it. Before I move there, let me tell you three important things, cells that exist in the stomach. We have the mucus cells that create mucus. That actually protect the wall from acidic, because the gastric juice is very, very acidic. I'm telling you, I mean, I told you this is between 1.5 to 2.5 as a pH. So it have a thick layer of mucus, and this mucus cells create a mucus to protect from this acidic gastric juice. We have what we call SHIF, SHIEF cells. Those are going to produce a pepsin, and pepsin enzyme, pepsin is the first time the proteins are going to be breaking down is in the stomach, not in the mouth. The starch has started being breaking down in the mouth. Now it's the protein that are going to be breaking down into peptides, into small portion of proteins. We call that peptide. We have also parietal cells, and those parietal cells, they are the one that will secrete HCl, hydrochloric acid, which is, this is why their acidity is very, very, very strong, 1.5 to 2.5. That's what caused the acidity of the stomach. The smooth muscles contract, mixing all these balls with the gastric juice, that they are the pepsin coming from the SHIF cells, this acidity coming from parietal cells. They are mixed. Now we don't call it a bolus anymore. We call it a chyme, CHYM. And this happened between 2 to 6 hours after a meal. So I repeat, protein digestions, large parts of protein digestions happen in the stomach. Stomach is a sac-like organs with three types of cells. One cells create, we call it mucus cells, is the one that create mucus to protect the wall from the acidic gastric juice. Where it came this acidic, as soon as the bolus is inside of the stomach, he stimulates a parietal cells. Parietal cells, what they do, they secrete hyaluronic acid. So the juice, the gastric juice, become very acidic, and the mucus is going to get stimulated, thicker. Is thicker. It's already thicker, actually. Is going to protect against this acidity that has been produced, but is this own. He protects himself against his own productions of acids. And the Schwann cells, they are the one that will secrete the pepsin that's going to break down the proteins that catabolize actually catabolize the proteins into small proteins called peptide. And the chemical digestion, remember, it's going to take 2 to 6 hours. The chemical digestions that is happening here, it's also helped by the contractions and relaxation of this smooth muscle that is gastric, that is stomach muscle. And now the digested food that is mixed with the gastric juice mixer is called chyme. I forget to mention that between when the bolus is coming from the esophagus to the stomach, we have what we call a cardiac sphincter. Cardiac sphincter is will going to be open to get this bolus inside the stomach. Once it's inside of the stomach, it will close to not let the food going back to the esophagus, because if that's happen, you will have what we call the heartburn. As a result, when the gastric juice is back up into the esophagus. Uh, you heard about the word ulcer. Ulcer, this sphincter is not functioning correctly due to a bacteria called the Helicobacter pylori that is completely destroyed these openings. So therefore, those patients are always having these sensations of ulcerations, feeling this very bad GERD, which is gastric esophageal disease, reflex heartburn disease. So now that the gastric the bolus is mixed with the gastric juice, and we call it a chyme, CHME. A small amount of the chyme is released into the next organ, which is the small intestine organ. Remember, we did not start the absorptions yet. However, few get absorbed here, such as water, some ions, and alcohol. This is why you feel the effect of alcohol in your stomach when you drink a glass of wine. So then this chyme will going to go into the small intestine, and go back to here because I want to see this sphincter. The small intestine, the duodenum, is a part of the small intestine, and we have a sphincter here that will open again to let this entrance of the chyme into the small intestine. He will open, allow only small amount of material to pass at the time. The movement of this chyme into the small intestine is regulated by hormones, the stomach distensions, the muscular reflex that influence the pyloric sphincter, and also it's regulated by this the stomach distensions, and this sphincter is going to control how much it needs to be going into the duodenum. Here in this slide, we just compare the stomach with cattle, sheep, goat, deer, and buffalo. We name it a rumen for the ruminant stomach. Why? Because we name it a rumen because the show again the food before passing it to the other stomach chambers. The stomach have different chambers. They contain, of course, enzyme that will break down cellulose. Cellulose is the cell wall of the plant. And they have different chambers. So they start the digestions and then they go back again and come back. So the cad returns. We don't call it bolus. We call it the balls that is formed from the grass. We call it cad. The cad return to the mouth to be reshowed before passing to the other system. Last chamber is a protein digestions. And how the herbs is breaking down is break down by bacteria and protozoans that can break down cellulose. It's very funny the way, but this is just between parentheses. So let's continue our journey with this chyme now. This food that's become bolus, then from bolus he become chyme. This chyme is going to go to the duodenum via the pyloric sphincter. So now the small intestine contain what? Contain this food. We call it chyme. CH, look at the word over here. Two function for the small intestine. Digestions, now absorptions can start. Remember, few absorptions happen in the stomach. Some water, some ions, and alcohol for those who drink alcohol. But here, nutrients are going to be absorbed into the body. The digestions continue. We start the process for absorptions. Chymes move from the stomach to the small intestine via the pyloric sphincter. And this is this small intestine, this is where the protein, fat, carbohydrate are completely digested, completely breaking down. Is complete. The digestions for proteins, fat, and carbohydrates, complete. Small intestine, we call it small intestines just because their diameter is very small, but it's very long. It's over 6 meters, 19.6 feet long. and is divided in three parts. We have the duodenum that is in direct contact via the sphincter, pylori sphincter with the stomach. We have the jejunum and the ileum. The undigested food is going to be sent to another intestine from the ileum. And here again, we are going to see how this undigested food is going to pass to the large intestine from the ileum to the first part of the large intestine, which is the colon, via a movement that we call, again, peristaltic movement. The contractions like muscle. So there, in the small intestine, all the digestion is complete here. The majority of nutrients, the good stuff, uh, amino acids, sugar, nucleic acids, are absorbed. While they are making their way to the small intestine. While they are making their way within the small intestine, very nice stuff. The good stuff are going to be absorbed here. There are other organs that they are going to contribute to the small intestine's functions. Those organs, we call them accessory glands. Accessory glands, and we are going to talk about those accessory glands. They are going to add secretions and enzymes to break down more the food into nutrients. The liver is one of the largest internal organ in human, and it's play an important, very important role on the digestions of fat and detoxifying the blood. The liver will produce a bile. Bile, what is it? It's just a digestive juice that is required to break down the fat in the duodenum. The liver also possesses the absorb vitamin and fatty acid and synthesize many plasma proteins. The gallbladder is really in direct contact with the liver and aid the liver by storing bile and concentrating bile salt. Okay, let me finish. I will continue with this small intestine, but let's talk about, as I said, those accessory um, organs that help the small intestine during this process of uh, 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 digestions and absorptions. The first accessory organ, the pancreas. The pancreas Is both, is endocrine and exocrine. Is endocrine because it secretes insulin and glucagon. Insulin is to eliminate glucose. Glucagon is secreting this glucose. Exocrine because it secretes a pancreatic juice into the duodenum. The pancreas secrete actually what is called bicarbonate. Bi is always two carbonate that neutralize the acidic chyme, and he secretes a variety of enzymes for the digestion of proteins and carbohydrates. Remember, the liver, it's for the fat, most of it. The chyme is mixed with the pancreatic juice. Is the pH is a little alkaline. It's basic. We call it alkaline solution, rich, because this is why I said that he secrete bicarbonate, because since it's rich in bicarbonate, the solutions has a pH, basic pH. So it's going to neutralize. Look at that. Remember, the stomach is very acidic. It's going to neutralize this acidity of the chyme coming from the stomach. This is why they have this bicarbonate that will neutralize, is alkaline. It will neutralize this acidity. And the pancreatic juice contain several digestive enzymes that break down starch, disaccharide, proteins, as well as a fat. The bile that is produced in the liver and stored and concentrated in the gallbladder enter the duodenum through the bile duct. See the bile ducts over here? Is going to enter the duodenum. The bile contain bile salt, which make lipid accessible to the water-soluble enzyme. And here, the monosaccharides, amino acid, bile salt, vitamin, and other nutrients are start to be absorbed by the cells. The liver, we talked about it just a few seconds ago. We know that have numerous functions. Some of them is detoxify the blood by removing and metabolizing poison substance. They are very rich actually in an organelle called a smooth reticulum endoplasmic, and the reticulum endoplasmic, smooth reticulum, make a fat. Make is the one where the fatty acid gets synthesized, and they are very rich also in enzyme that will detoxify the poisonous substance. So this is the first things. I mean, any alcoholic person, the first organ that shut down in those people that are a heavy drinker, it's the liver, because the liver, their function is to detoxify the body from poisonous substance. So when somebody is drinking too much, he's going completely abusing of the function of the liver. So the liver in those poor people are functioning so hard that it will shut off. So of course they will produce some plasma membrane and also albumin and fibrinogen, destroyed all the red blood cells and convert hemoglobin to breakdown product in bile. That is called, I don't want you to pay attention to that. It's bilirubin and biliverdin. Produce bile that's is going to store in the gallbladder before entering the small intestine, where they are going to be emulsified by the fat, but also store glucose as a glycogen. And also, not only store, he can break down those glycogen into glucose if the body need energy. So they are going to maintain these constant glucose concentrations in the blood. And they produce also urea from amino acid and ammonia. The liver also possesses the fact that they can absorb the vitamins and fatty acid and synthesize therefore many plasma protein. The gallbladder, which is a small organ that aids the liver by storing bile and concentrating bile salt. And sometimes, we are talking about fat. Sometimes the cholesterol, which is part of a fat, it's a lipid, it's still with lipids. It can be stored in those gallbladder and get crystallized, and it's going to be very painful that the only solution is to remove it. So this is why they have some people that have their gallbladder removed and they can live perfectly good. So it just in this case, in this case, you will have the liver in direct contact with the duodenum, not the bile go directly from the liver into the duodenum, not into the gallbladder, then into the duodenum. This is just to show the hepatic portal system, the blood. The small intestine, as I said, absorbs products of digestions. Those nutrient molecules travel in the hepatic portal vein to the liver. The liver will clean them. They are going to clean them. They monitor that. They are going to clean it before they take it to the bloodstream. So they are going to monitor this blood contact that they are coming from the stomach, making sure that it's clean before deliver it through the hepatic portal system into the liver. And from the hepatic portals, they go to, they are going to empty in the inferior vena cava, and they reach the rest of the organ. This is just some liver disorders such as the jaundice, the hepatitis A, the hepatitis B and C. And those hepatitis A, B, and C can be spread by sexual contact, by saliva, also saliva. The cirrhosis become fatty. They are replaced by inactive fibrous scar tissue. The organ become fatty, and they are replaced by inactive fibrous scar tissue in the liver. This is what I said about those alcoholic people. They force the liver to detoxify large amounts of alcohol that the liver just shut down. and they develop this cirrhosis because the organs become just a fatty and inactive fibrous scar tissue. I continue now with I still in the digestions. I still in the small intestine. The small intestines have a finger-like a surface area. We call that a villi, and in the top of those villi, we have a microvilli. And all those villi, actually, remember the absorptions is going to start over here, right? The absorptions is going to start here. And absorptions happen by deviations and active transport, all right? This is where the hepatic portal is going to start absorbing this material, cleaning them, and bring them to the bloodstream, right? So cleaning them in the liver. So the villi absorb nutriment into the body. Each villi has a capillary bed and lymphatic capillary, which is lacteal. Sugar and amino acid enter the blood capillary, carried to the liver by hepatic portal system. The glycerol and the fatty acid will enter the lacteal. The lacteal is the capillary that exists in each velocity, and eventually dump into the blood with the lymph. Those finger-like velocity and the top of them, they are a villi, they increase almost the surface area 600 times. So the blood is supplied next to those small intestine. This is why we talk about that each villi have those capillary, have those supply of blood, because the absorptions is going to start here. Now we are coming from the small intestine. The food that is from the pancreas, we call pancreas, from the stomach, we call it a chyme. He go to the liver, pancreas, the gallbladder. Now we call it a bile. Large intestine, they are rich in the large intestine. The large intestine absorbs actually, but while we are traveling from the small intestine to the large intestine, remember that all digestion is over. All our food now, they become nutriment. Majority are absorbed with the help of the velocity and the microvelocity. The surface area is really very like 600 times bigger to 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 help with this process of absorptions. So we can reach and we have those capillaries bed under those velocities to help with the absorptions. The large intestines, we do during this reabsorb some water also and some salt and some vitamins. Not only that, we can produce vitamin K and B here. So the large intestine will reabsorb the water from this endish. What came in the large intestine are just the food that they were not, and they were not digested. The digestion is over, but the food that they are not digested, they came into the large intestine. Large intestine will absorb some water coming from those indigestible food, the food that are not being digested. And the process to be a waste materials is going to start. The large intestine is much smaller in length compared to the small intestine, but it's larger in diameter. We have transverse colon, descending colon, ascending colon. The end of the descending colon, we call it the sigmoid colon. We have the rectum that is in complete direct with the anus, and we have the cecum, and we have the appendix, which is a vermiforms as a form. By breaking down the indigestible materials, we produce some vitamin K, which is very important for blood clotting, and also vitamin B. Those three parts, the cecum, the colon, and the rectum, they are the three parts of the large intestine. The colon is where many bacteria, or what we call intestinal flora, that aid in the digestive process. The colon has four regions, as I said: transverse, ascending, descending, sigmoid, uh, sigmoid colon. The main function is to extract water. This is why this indigested food, this is where we get some water that is going to be absorbed, is if it's not and mineral salt from indigested water. And also store, the colon is also going to store those waste material. Feces contain actually 75% water and 25 solid matter, and third of the solid matters have bacteria. The water that is not being reabsorbed lead to diarrhea, because 75% of the feces this is just actually, I'm repeating myself over here. Those enzymes, that digestive enzyme that I really want you to pay attention of it. The salivary amylase in salva begin with the digestions in the mouth. Additional digestions by actions of the enzyme like pancreatic amylase, the maltase, they are even, we are going to break down those maltase that has been formed in during the first breaking down of the carbohydrate. The carbohydrate is very complex digestion, so it happened in two steps. It happened first in the mouth, and then in the pancreas, because only the glucose, simple sugar, the monosaccharide, is going to be absorbed by the intestinal villi. So it should not be stay under the form of maltose, which is a disaccharide. Again, the protein digestions that begin in the stomach. Mm, Why? Because the Schwann cells will secrete pepsin, and the parietal cells will secrete HCl. So this low pH, that acidity, it will stimulate the pepsin to break down the protein. The peptide into peptide, the peptide are going to be broken down further in the small intestine by other enzyme called the trypsin and peptidase. Protein digestions require then two steps and only amino acid, because all what we need is amino acid coming from those proteins coming from your food. They are going to be absorbed by the villi. So first I have to break down those proteins into peptide, and then who helped me doing that? The pepsine. The pepsine is secreted by Schwann cells that exist in the stomach. But this pepsine is going to be stimulated only if the parietal cells is stimulated to secrete HCl. So this low acidity stimulate pepsin. Pepsin will break down protein into peptide. Peptide is going to go to the small intestine. Other enzymes such as trypsin and peptidase will break down this peptide into amino acid. Amino acid got absorbed by the intestinal villi. And this is very nice summary for all what we talk about it, starting from the oral, from the mouth, up to the anus, which is and you have actually the four functions, which is the intake of the food, digestions, absorptions, and eliminations. We will continue when we meet next time about the next part of this chapter, which is nutrition. Okay, so if you have any questions, I am going to stop recording right